Full disclosure, the voice you are listening to now is artificially generated, brought to you by satisphonic.com. See the link in the description for more details. What's the weirdest thing a medical professional has casually said to you? I was getting my blood drawn for a mono test back around 2006. The older lady nurse asked me what sort of music I liked. I figured she was making small talk to get my mind off the needles, so I rattled off a few bands I'd been listening to. One of them happens to be Postal Service. She says, "Oh, I know that one." I reply, "Yay, it's the same lead singer's Death Cab for Cuties." She says, "I know, he's my son." I live in Ireland. The surgeon who replaced my hip is also a farmer. The day before I was due to be discharged, he came in on his rounds. He said, "I may or may not see you tomorrow. It depends on the dog." So I said, "Oh, what's up with the dog?" He told me the dog broke his leg and was having it set tomorrow, but he wasn't sure what time, so I said, "Sure, bring in the old dog and I'll mind him." This is rural Ireland, bear in mind. This is rural Ireland, bear in mind. And I was in the convalescent area of the hospital by then, and shortly after breakfast he arrived in with the dog, lovely border collie with his leg in plaster. He stayed with me watching TV till the doc was finished replacing another hip and was ready to discharge me, and we could all go home. It could only happen in Ireland. There's an ophthalmologist on TikTok who plays a bunch of different doctors, and my favorite is rural medicine. People pay him in crops or other non-monetary goods, and the only rise at the Texaco shop. Dr. Glaucomflecken. When I was 12, I had a dentist say, "Hold on, I think I might be counting wrong. You shouldn't have those yet." "Okay, never mind, those are definitely your wisdom teeth. Your mouth is just huge, I guess." They said it was the youngest they've ever seen anyone get their wisdom teeth. They called in every dentist in the building to come look at my mouth. "You're a prodigy." I had a really weird throat issue. It didn't hurt, it just felt like something was stuck in there. I had been a vegetarian for years at this point, and the doctor said I likely had a chicken bone stuck in there. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Haven't you heard? Humans will unknowingly eat an average of 7 chickens in our lifetimes due to them crawling into our mouths while we sleep. Science a fact? That's actually not true. Chicken-eating Jorg, who eats an average of 10 chickens every night, is an outlier who shouldn't have been included in the review. When I was like 20, my endocrinologist took a good look at me and asked, "Are you okay with your face being so asymmetrical?" I had never really noticed it before, but boy have I noticed it since. Thanks for the complex asshole. Same here, the dentist said. "I like the top part of your face, but not the bottom part." Since then, I'm very aware of my mouth and chin. After 30 years, I still hear him say it. He probably meant that your jaw is messing your teeth up a little bit, likely in a way only dentists would ever notice or care about. One of my patients, I'm a nurse, was noted as being unremarkable by a doctor and was so genuinely hurt that I got the doctor to explain it to her, and that he liked her very much, but didn't think she had anything to worry about. When my grandma had her first scan after being diagnosed with cancer, we got a good laugh reading grossly unremarkable brain. The cancer was everywhere else. This is the part where all your dignity goes out the window. I'm going to tape your penis to your abdomen. When I got the snip, I was told to drop my drawers and lie on a table in the other room. I, gentleman doctor, walked into the room, taped my dong to my abdomen, and then introduced himself as doctor. I'm dying imagining the alternate universe where he doesn't introduce himself and just waves and says, "All right, see ya," and walks out of the room and directly out of the clinic. The dong taper strikes again. This is no joke. I had a medical professional say, "I used to be a heroin addict, so I'm pretty good at this." As she was putting in my IV and FIO, I laughed so hard. The plasma place I went to in college seemed to only employ ex-junkies. They were masters of their craft. Then again, like you said, they know what they are doing, plus good for them for getting clean. Well, that's one way to turn a hobby into a career. After destroying my knee riding B-marks at 17, the emergency surgeon said, "Wow, really fucked that up." 10 years later, and another serious knee injury from riding. I saw the same surgeon. He did a great job on the first one. First words out of his mouth were, "I remember you. Fucked up the other one." Huh? I like this guy. He waited 10 years for that moment. Probably made his entire career. Damn, I don't know how I'd feel knowing I fucked up enough to be remembered by an emergency surgeon. Not great lol. I literally broke my knee 90 deg sideways. It had to be forced straight by him, then immediately into surgery to repair basically every ligament and piece of soft tissue in there. Lucky I didn't get a fake knee at 17 from that one. Since I'm not sure which knee this was, I just griped both of mine in horror to be safe. Hope that's cool. You again. Couldn't live asymmetrically, could you? Following a checkup. We're going to have to remove your testicles. Just kidding, you should seen your face. Lol, do you go to Dr. Leo Spaceman? Sounds like you could use a little rum and Ritalin. Back pain, I'm not young. Doctor just said basically, well, that's just life for you. You're tall. So I'm just going to end up being a hunched over 90-year-old. Lol, you're not going to see 90-year-old. Lol, you're not going to see 90. How many tall old people have you ever seen? Oh, yeah. How tall are you? I'm a 6-foot tall woman, and I think about this a lot. There are no tall old ladies, just little olds. Edit, everyone chiming in to give me hope of a long life. I love you. Reminder, you shrink as you age. Those little old ladies used to be taller. Very true. My great-aunt was 6.7th at her tallest, but was 5.11th when she died at 95. Dig her ass up and get her on the court. This is the most out-of-pocket thing I've ever read, Leo. Oof. Unfortunately, he has a point. For a while, I knew a guy who was over 6'5" and worked as a genetic counselor. One time, we were chatting and he just casually mentioned that he wasn't expecting to get terribly old. He knew the statistics because of his job, and the odds are not good for people over 6. On the other hand, that's just averages, not an individual outcome. Plenty of short people die in car accidents in their 20s, and plenty of tall people live well into old age. Plenty of short people die in car accidents in their 20s feet, just couldn't reach the brake pedal. A nurse of some kind took my blood pressure. He said what the numbers were. I asked, is that good? He said, I'm not qualified to give you a professional opinion on the matter. You should ask your doctor. I asked, but, like unprofessionally, is that good? He said unprofessionally. Well, in my purely personal opinion that I am sharing with you as an individual and not in any medical or official capacity whatsoever, you should buy stronger deodorant. Edit. For clarity, I was definitely stinky. I was homeless at the time. I was well aware of this fact. If you're worried you're a little funky, don't. You would almost assuredly notice if you smelled really bad. If you don't mind, I'd like to show everyone pictures of your tonsils. According to her, I had the most disgusting tonsils she had ever seen in her years in the business, and gosh darn, she wanted to show them off. I had a similar experience at a dentist. I apparently had a very rare problem, and even the oldest doctor only had seen this 2 times in his life. For the next few sessions, all other doctors were called in, and he showed them it. I was fine with it, but it was an odd situation sitting on the dentist chair, while 4 doctors and a few nurses were around you, and looked very interested what will happen next. So, I was the real-life example for a textbook lecture. My husband has 2 rare chronic illnesses, and his doctor had the residents try to diagnose what he has based on his symptoms. None of them got it right. He said it was kind of funny to watch them all trying to get it right. Did they start with lupus? Reminds me of a time when I took my cat to the vet. It was time for him to get sterilized, but during the appointment, the vet discovered that his testicles had never descended. It caused a small sensation in that office, and every single vet and trainee vet in that office wanted to feel his empty ballsack. After the second person copped a feel, my cat started squirming. By the 5th, he drew blood. All right, the vet said, as she withdrew her shredded finger. I guess we deserve that. Oh sure, they're all understanding when your cat gets pissy about his ballsack being fondled. But when it's me, apparently, I have an attitude problem. Happened to me too, except with a mass in my toe. Apparently that sort of mass doesn't really show up in toes on top of being rare to begin with. The doctor seems to have shown my scans and test results to quite a few people. Way to go. I hope you got a certificate or something. I had gross tonsils too. They were doing something called seeding. Apparently it's gross and makes them smell real bad too. Was living in a foreign country and had a cold flu type illness. Went to the doc and he comes in eating a bowl of cereal. Already weird. Checks some things and says, do you know what AIDS is? I'm in complete shock and say, yes, I do. He follows up with it's a virus and there is no cure. Goes on to explain why there is no cure, all while I'm seeing my life over as I know it. Finally ends with, but you don't have that virus. You have a different one, much more common and treatable, but I wanted you to understand why an antibiotic wouldn't work. Still in shock. I'm like so I don't have AIDS then, right? He goes no and walks out. What a roller coaster. Edit. This was in Switzerland about 15 years ago, and I'm American. Yes, he was slurping his cereal the whole time. Edit 2. He did explain the difference between hive. Edit 2. He did explain the difference between hive. Guess he just wanted to come in hot and get my attention. Thanks all. Yeah, I went to a sexual health checkup and the doc just started listing each possible sty before finishing with you. Don't have those. For some reason, they love to act like it's a game show. Herpes? We tested you for herpes. Did we see herpes? Buzz no herpes! Buzz no herpes! Gonorrhea. Gonorrhea? Do we see gonorrhea? Lol. Doc, do you know what AIDS is? Patient. Oh, yes, sweating doc. Well, you should be happy to know the good news is you don't have that. Patient. That's a good thing, I guess. Doc, the bad news is that you probably have cancer. Doc, on phone. I have some bad news and some worse news for you. Patient. Okay, what's the bad news? Doc, I have your test results, and the report says you probably have about 7 days or so left to live. Patient. Oh my God! If that's the bad news, what the hell is the worst news? Doc, I meant to call you last week. It tweaked text a bit based on comments. Doc, I have some bad news. You better sit down. Patient. What is it, Doc? Doc, you have very little time left. Patient. Oh my God, how long do I have? Doc, 5 patient, 5 patient, 5 fought, years, months, Doc, 4. This reads like a great sitcom skit. Lucille, not Dr. Wordsmith. How's my son? Dr. Fishman. He's going to be all right. Lindsay. Finally, some good news from this guy. George Michael. There's no other way to take that. Dr. Fishman. That's a great attitude. I got to tell you, if I was getting this news, I don't know that I'd take it this well. Lucille. But you said he was all right. Dr. Fishman. Yes, he's lost his left hand. So he's going to be all right. You just hang on right there. We will get you a wheelchair and admitted to the hospital. We have to do a colonoscopy, but don't worry, I will knock you out before sticking a camera up your arm. My doc was named, no lie, Dr. Stiff. After my last colonoscopy, he told me in the recovery room. Well, that's the last time you're getting stiffed. I'm retiring end of the year. I appreciate people who turn their names into verbs. My surgeon, during surgery, to replace pins in my broken finger that had been pushed out by my own body. I'm really getting them in there this time. You little freak of nature. Edit. Came back to add pictures since many were curious. I'm going to label these as ENSFU and 2 for blood, bones and stitches. Proceed with caution. Original break X-ray ENSFU, 2 pins pushing out. 10 days post-op, ENSFU 2X up U X-ray of misaligned pins ENSFU, 2/3 surgery. 1 day post-op ENSFU, 2/3 surgery. 1 day post-op, new 12 days later ENSFU 2. I would kinda be flattered by this. Also, did you make a lot of Wolverine jokes, or did the pins get pushed in a direction that wasn't along your fingers? Sadly, they were put in to hold the bone in place, so it could heal. The pinholes healed too fast, and pushed the pins out of position, so they weren't holding the bone where it needed to be. I looked more like a knock-off Edward Scissorhands than Wolverine Low. My doctor once asked me, male, if I had been hit in the taint. I was young and didn't know what a taint was. So he said, you it taint pussy, and it taint us. You can't ask a kid if they've been hit in the perineum. Hell, you can't ask an average adult that, but it's still a relevant question. Source, I'm a doctor. I kinda love that surgeon. I told an Obgyn during an exam my husband and I had just started trying to get pregnant, and she said, are you tracking your cycle or just fucking all time? Hearing that come out of a small, elderly black woman was freaking hilarious. She was close to retirement and had zero filter. Miss her. Doctor, you look great. How did you lose weight? Son, eating disorder. Anorexia, doctor, well, keep doing whatever you are doing. It's working great. Oh man, I had a family member who was dropping weight, and everyone was telling her to keep doing whatever she was doing. She was doing crystal meth. Thankfully quit it soon. She couldn't afford it. So yeah, none have used that phrase anymore with anyone. I lost a bunch of weight when I had undiagnosed type 1 diabetes. Some people flattered my weight loss, but mostly people said I got really thin and asked if I'm eating all right. My son is about your age and single. Do you want his number? Gynecologist. So while checking out your lady parts, Doc was like, you know, who would really like this? My oldest David. Your vagina was approved. I want grandkids and, dang, this thing is a grandkid factory. Slaps hood. What a double entendre. I rarely actually say, oh God, out loud. Vague just hits different when it's quality controlled and approved by your gynecologist. Duh. Imaging saying, yes son, I have somebody I'd like you to meet, followed by later, by the way, I saw her lady, bits before you even met. I know at least a dozen Jewish gynecologists who could be guilty of this. It's probably the most true stereotype of Jewish mothers. I was about 18 when I first had a pilonidal cyst at the base of my spine. It was excruciating. Couldn't walk, couldn't sit. Just pain all the time. Go in to the doctor. They lance and drain the cyst, put in some gauze and tell me it is gonna continue to drain and I need to go see a specialist in a couple days. First day, I feel so much better. Pressure is gone and I can move normally again. Second day, some pain is back and I'm getting concerned again. Third day, everything is worse than before and I head into the specialist and tell him so. So there I am, bent over this table with my shorts around my ankles when I hear this doctor exclaim, holy shit. So I naturally assume I am gonna lose my whole ass and everything is coming to an end for me. He follows up with, did they use an entire fucking roll of gauze? As he starts to look like a magician pulling a never-ending line of handkerchiefs out of my arm. Felt infinitely better after that, but for a moment there I thought the worst. If you want to help people, don't go into medicine. As a doctor, I'm nothing more than a people mechanic, and much like a car mechanic, I patch people back together well enough to get them out of the door until I see them again. If I could go back, I'd run as far away from medicine as I could. Edit. Whew, this gained more traction than I expected. For context, this sentiment was offered to me by a 70-year-old, 40-year tenured physician who was on more boards than I care to list and was a very well-respected surgeon. As many in the comments have stated, his distaste for the job had very much to do with the long list of hoops that he had to jump through in order to order and perform even the most basic treatments. And yes, the endless charting was exhaustive to witness, much less perform. He also went so far as to send a hospital-wide email asking any physician who had the time to sit in a meeting with all of the pre-med people who had dedicated the most time to shadowing for a brief back and forth. Asked a few questions along the lines of who's unhappy with their job, how many have been divorced, how many think you're overworked, how many would go back to med school, especially with the debt load today, and a few more questions that painted a very, at least with his test group of 40 people, realistic picture of how unhappy they all were. At least 80% raised their hands in favor of the most negative option presented and briefly attested to how bad and hard the job had been. And of those that were heavily in favor of the job, I'd say at least 80% were quite obviously there for the money and nothing more. I still have an immense respect for those who choose to work in healthcare, but I'm also glad that I steered away from it, especially when I consider that I would have entered residency in the midst of a pandemic. You know what I think. If a doctor said this to me, I would respect and trust them more low. A German friend of mine did car mechanic, surgeon pipeline, and he said he got tired of working on cars, so wanted to work on people. He'd taken the required tests to qualify for med school and kept it in his back pocket in case he got tired of being a mechanic, so worked out for him. Really cool guy, super unique, comes off like a loud metalhead, one of the smartest and nicest guys I know. My previous Obgyn came through my line at my old job. For some reason I blanked on who he was. Like I knew him, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember how. He saw I was struggling and said, don't remember me. I'll give you a hint. Last time I saw you, you were in my office with your ankles in the air, loudly in front of a line of little old ladies fresh from church, wanting to buy flowers from the garden center. He was an amazing doc and figured out what was wrong with me when no other doc could, but in that moment, the embarrassment could have killed me low. Being a knowledgeable doctor and being socially inept often go hand in hand. I had a doctor tell me that my metabolism is so slow that I would do very well in an apocalypse. My doctor told me this when he noticed my chronic low body temperature and asked me other questions about weight gain and pooping frequency. He said some people are just built to hibernate. You're just like hibernating all the time. This was in the same conversation where he diagnosed me with a sleep disorder too. Can't even hibernate properly. Somehow a few of my old co-workers and I would make poop jokes and were very comfortable with each other when one of them claimed she would only go once a week. She was shocked that I'd go multiple times a day. My stomach hurts thinking of not going at least once a day. When my girlfriend was in the ICU, one of the nurses sort of shrugged and said dismissively, "She's gonna die anyhow." She should have. Her kidneys had shut completely down and she was so swollen that her tongue wouldn't fit in her mouth. We were making the decision whether to continue life support or not. She didn't die. A month and a half later, she walked out of the hospital and into my car for the ride home. When I was in the hospital with COVID, my nurse told me to either breathe or die, but I needed to choose because she was busy. When my kidneys were failing, my doctor sat me down and described my treatment plan to me, then looked me in the eyes and told me that it was totally all right if I refused treatment, but I would definitely die if I did. Wow, you have the flattest feet I've ever seen. Couldn't help thinking about the Barbie movie Low. I asked my cardiologist growing up what the goop was they put on before echoes. He said, "Yuck snot." I believed him for way too long. That was hilarious. It made me laugh. I probably would have laughed throughout the whole If you ever tried to have a baby, the kid would snap your pelvis in two and rip you in half, said by my gynecological surgeon. He said it in the most casual manner. I was mortified, eater. Thank goodness I was there to get a hysterectomy. Ha! I honestly think there's a thing with surgeons' brains where they're around it so much that they don't get what's normal to the rest of us after a while. I worked with palliative patients for over half a decade, lots of gallows humor, etc., etc. Every now and then I forget to turn on my filter, say something wildly blunt, inappropriate, insensitive, and realize I probably should not have said whatever it was when I see the look on the other person's face. Cue the quick subject change. I used to work in computer forensics, where we used dark humor to cope with the horrific stuff you were often seeing. My wife is ex-military surgeon, so she could handle the jokes and stories I'd bring home fine, but sometimes we'd be out somewhere and I'd start a story, and she'd give me this very specific look that meant that's not a story for normal people. You have pretty blood, followed by, I bet you have heavy period. Unlocked a memory of everyone who takes my blood out commenting on the color of it. Apparently, it's very dark red, more so than normal. I didn't notice because I do my best to keep it inside me at all time. The fuck? Vampire maybe? I had a woman drawing my blood who had a heavy Eastern European accent place a vial in my hand and tell me, "See how warm it is, like hot chocolate." Now I promise I'm not going to drink it. Lady, in a million years, I would never have thought you were going to drink it, but now I'm worried. Was a teen and seeing my pediatrician. There was a baby or infant in another room, wailing its head off. After a few minutes, my doc said, "Don't mind him, we just lopped his leg off." Lol, that reminds me of a doctor I went to get skin tags removed. He was literally just using scissors, so after he was done, I looked like I had wrestled with a cheese grater. I'm trying not to yell, but one good one made me say, "Fuck," really loud. I instantly apologized and he said, "Oh no worry, my 5-year-old says worth." It looks like ground beef. A doctor looking into my extremely painful strep-ridden throat. He gave me a Z-pack from his stash there and then, and told me to take the first one now. It was bad. Reminds me of one time I was at my pediatrician as a teen because of a persistent cough. She wanted to listen to my lungs, and halfway through my first inhale, she just blurted out bronchitis. Like, damn, my lungs must have sounded textbook if she got it that fast. Wait, did he say he wanted to be awake when I was in the operating room waiting to get my appendix removed? I met the anesthesiologist and asked to him make sure I didn't wake up in the middle of it. I didn't want to be aware of what was going on. He counted me down, and right before it all went black, he said this to the surgeon. I remember thinking, "You, Ashu." And then it all went dark. I don't envy anesthesiologists. I mean, they always ask their patients to tell something about themselves to distract them, and never hear the end of it. I had a handful of surgeries as a kid, and the last one I vividly remember screaming, "I'm crazy, ha 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 ha." I remember the anesthesiologist saying, "You sure are, bud." Then I was out. Also, I remember waking up in the middle of one surgery, looking around a little bit, hearing someone say, "Oh no, he's awake." They slapped the mask back on me and I was out immediately. Walk-in clinic. Doctor was an old man, maybe 80. He asked where I live, and I said across the street, over Jay's Street Meats restaurant. Street Meats restaurant. Street meat. We used to call prostitutes that. Okay, roll up your sleeve. We'll do your blood pressure now. Do you swallow? He meant to ask if I have a hard time swallowing pills or not. The school nurse asked me this when I was 10, and I had no idea what she meant. So I was like, "Oh, yeah." And she handed me adult Tylenol, which I promptly popped in my mouth and chewed up like usual kids' medicine. It tasted horrendous, the most bitter thing I've ever eaten, and only after I told my mum about it did I learn what the nurse meant by, "Can you swallow pills?" I snapped both of my Achilles while finishing off a set of heavy leg presses with calf extensions. I didn't close it all of the way and the sled crashed down on me, pinning my legs next to my head. Yes, I was dumb not to use the safety pins. They weren't there. They constantly disappeared to other machines. So I was lazy for not using them and paid the price. The doctor looked at my scans and said, "These are mirror images of each other. You must have good form."